So, in the comments, someone asked me a question that I think is a very, very intelligently worded question. I think they said, what good and valid reason do you have to believe in reincarnation or that you existed before your birth? I think the words they used were existed before your birth, but they're talking about reincarnation, I think. So, number one, let me deal with a couple of things in the question that kind of impressed me. So, number one, they didn't ask me, how can you prove this? How do you know this for sure? They asked me, what are my good or valid reasons for believing this? And this is a belief of mine. I'm not going to claim that I know it for sure. And I've said in the past that, well, I have no use for beliefs. Either I know something or I don't. If I don't know, I'll just admit that I don't know. And that's fine. I'm not going to claim to know something that I don't know. I think a lot of problems in the world and in human history could have been avoided if people just refrained from claiming to know things that they don't actually know. But it's fine to believe things for good and valid reasons. Sometimes our knowledge is limited. We don't have a for sure answer to some of the big questions in life. But we almost can't live our lives without coming up with a provisional answer to some of those big questions. And one of those, of course, has to do with life after death, the immortality of the soul. We have to decide, I think, what we believe about these questions. We may not know for sure, but we can't avoid the question. I think in a lot of ways it kind of does affect how we live, how we experience our own inner worlds or whatever. So I really appreciate the way the question was framed. So I'm not going to try to prove the immortality of the soul. I'm not going to try to prove reincarnation. I'm just going to very briefly state what I think are some good and valid reasons for believing that you existed before you were born, or that you'll continue to exist after you die. So, one, of course, we could point to a lot of case studies where there are people who um, remember past lives, and maybe there's details they remember from past lives that have been able to be validated. Maybe they remember things that they couldn't possibly know any other way. In some cases, these have been children. I mean, you can look into this phenomena for yourself, you can investigate it, you can draw your own conclusions. Having looked into it some myself, I'm not going to cite any specific examples, but I've looked at it and it does seem to me that there are some case studies that support the belief in reincarnation. It's like, okay, there are apparently people out there who remember past lives. Their testimony appears to be credible. And I mean, if some people experience reincarnation, then it seems reasonable to think that we all probably are in some kind of cycle of reincarnation. It's not just some people that reincarnate. If some people reincarnate, probably we all do. But aside from that, I would consider the problem of the prodigy. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this is one that Plato kind of pointed to, or Socrates. And I mean, to sum that up briefly, it's like, how do you explain someone like Mozart or something, some child prodigy, who, almost from the time they're born, they seem to have this natural talent and proclivity, uh, this mastery, really, over some art that would take a lifetime, maybe several lifetimes, to develop. I think in a lot of cases, a prodigy is someone who has developed these skills, these talents, this knowledge over maybe multiple lifetimes. For myself, my experience with this comes especially from philosophy, in particular esoteric philosophy, and martial arts. There's been many, many times where I simply reflect on an occult symbol or something, an occult phrase or teaching, and it's like it just opens itself up to me, right? I don't know how else to say it. It's like I'm remembering it. Yes, I know exactly what that, symbol signifies. And I just have these insights into those symbols. And I think that one of the reasons that the occult focuses so much on the symbolic mode of teaching, which is the mode of teaching that Pythagoras is said to have favored, is that it speaks to us across lifetimes. It triggers something deep within us, below the level of conscious awareness. Because obviously, our conscious awareness is not where our memories from past lives are located, because you can't remember your past lives. Um, but I think that when you touch upon things that you've explored and experienced in past lives, that speaks to you on a deeper level. Another area where I've experienced that personally has to do with martial arts. Of course, in this lifetime, I've trained in several martial arts for most of my life, but the talent and the skill and the level of mastery that I have was apparent even to a lot of my instructors very early on. There were things that I just like picked up, I just understood, that really impressed some of my instructors. I was training in Filipino like stick fighting or something, and my instructor commented on some subtle aspect of the way I was moving, like footing or something, and he hadn't taught it to me. And he's like, "Why are you moving that way?" He was just kind of he was trying to figure out if I had trained with someone else. I hadn't. And he's like, "Yeah, I mean that's like traditionally that's the way." So without even having been taught, it's like I was performing this art like someone who had mastered it in a previous life. I don't know how else to say it. And a lot of times, especially as I've moved into more of an instructor role, it's not uncommon at all for a student to ask me, like, okay, well, what would you do if someone did this or if this happened? And I mean, we're talking some pretty advanced kind of stuff. And without hesitation, I just know exactly what to do. And you could say that's the product of my training in this lifetime, but I'm saying like my own experience. Countless times, just like on the fly, I have taught advanced techniques that I know for a fact I've never been taught in this lifetime. Now, I mean, if you take someone like Pythagoras, for example, before he was Pythagoras, one of his previous incarnations, for example, was as a warrior in the Trojan Wars, right? So imagine, just for example, someone that old, someone who has been a warrior since the Trojan Wars. Imagine if they reincarnate over and over, um, and maybe in multiple lifetimes they've fought in wars or taken up an interest in martial arts or whatever. And what if there is a part of the soul that retains that? Would that be episodic or semantic knowledge? I'm not sure. I don't remember. Um, I mean, just let me put it this way: like the Jason Bourne movie, the first one. He wakes up on a park bench. He doesn't remember who he is or anything like that, but these two cops are kind of fucking with him or whatever. And they try to hit him with a stick, and he just goes off on them, puts them both down pretty quickly. He's not sure what he just did. That is so deeply ingrained in him that it just comes out. What if, over the course of many lifetimes, something like martial arts, something like fighting, hand to hand combat, becomes so deeply ingrained that it's in your soul? I don't know how else to say it. You're reborn, it's still there. You just naturally gravitate toward multiple martial arts, some of which you may have trained in before, you know? But, maybe you've just had so much combat experience in other lives, you've had so much training in other lives that it just comes out. That is the way I feel, or the way I felt when I was doing martial arts. Um, and I would say things or do things that are like very, very fine tuned and subtle that would just blow masters away. Like instructors have been really, really impressed with, like, why did you do it that way? And I'm like, well, because of this or whatever. Like, I mean, I'm talking about put on the spot against like two or three armed attackers. It was like, oh yeah, I should do this, I should do that. They're all on the ground now. You know what I mean? Um, so that is one of the reasons, and I consider that a good and valid reason why I personally believe in past lives. I know for a fact that I've not acquired all of my knowledge of martial arts and esoteric philosophy in this lifetime. It comes to me so effortlessly. It's like remembering a dream. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know how else to put it. There's probably other people that can relate to, things kind of like that, maybe in a slightly different way. But so that would be one. That would be one good and valid reason. Another is a little bit more heady, a little bit more abstract, but you think about what the soul is and how much does a soul weigh, right? What are its dimensions? What is its volume and mass? It seems to me just self evident that whatever this mysterious thing is that we call our soul, it is something indivisible. It's not something that is the sum of parts. It's some kind of indissoluble unity. It doesn't have parts. There's nothing you could add together that would ever give you a soul. And whatever it is that we call a soul, you can't divide it. So that is, mathematically speaking, something like zero, right? I mean, clearly the soul has zero mass and volume. It has zero weight. It has zero dimensions. Therefore, it has zero parts. Um, how do you divide zero, right? So it seems to me that the soul is indivisible, and that which is indivisible is uncreatable and indestructible. So just when you examine it rationally, logically, mathematically, the soul cannot be created or destroyed because it doesn't have component parts. And so, whatever this soul is within us, it must have existed before our body and our egoic self came to be, and it must continue to persist after our ego and our body dissolve. To me, that is the inescapable conclusion. And of course, there's other arguments for the immortality of the soul. To me, that's actually the strongest one because it at least approaches a mathematical argument, and nothing trumps a mathematical argument in my estimation. So, those two or three things, I would say that is my good and valid reason for believing that I existed before I was born. And of course, I have done other videos talking about reincarnation. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on the subject, maybe more arguments, more proofs, or whatever, I recommend scrolling back through some of my past videos and maybe re examining some of my older content. But just off the top of my head, after a couple of drinks, because tomorrow's my day off, those are, some of my answers. So I really appreciate the question again, and I hope that you've appreciated my attempt at an answer. So have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening. Peace.